Hello, everybody. Great to be with you on a Sunday night and 1 hour late. And I'll explain why in a moment. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Melissa in Great Neck, Elvis in Geneva, New York, Bella in Florida, Yehud in South Carolina, Joseph in Sierra Nevada, Shandora in the Bronx, wishing everyone Shana Tova Umetuka a good and sweet new year. Amen. Everybody should be blessed with a sweet and healthy and upright and meaningful and prosperous new year. It should be your best year yet. You should hear only good news. You should give nachas to your family and get nachas from your family. It should be nothing but goodness all around. There should be peace in Israel, in America, in your family, in your soul. You should all be blessed with nothing but goodness. And we all say, Amen. Bill in mid-Missouri, Belle in Texas, Nancy, North Carolina, Joe in the Inland Empire, Lucy in Minnesota, Aoife in Florida, Camille in Texas, Chaim in Florida, DPR NYC, Shalom from New York City, and Yehuda said Amen. Okay, so I just wanted to give everyone a chance to be here. So I am so sorry. Yesterday, post Shabbos, Motzi Shabbos, I told you on Friday I wasn't going to be able to teach class last night because I had to be in Malibu to do a Q&A for Guns N' Moses special screening. Then tonight we were supposed to resume at the regular time, 6 p.m. I was ready to go at 6 p.m., but I was just coming in from an event that I attended at the Museum of Tolerance, and I realized that I left my wallet in the theater at the Museum of Tolerance. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do? I mean, Rosh Hashanah is coming tomorrow. If I don't get back there, who knows when I'll get it, if I'll get it. And I got it. This is incredible. I really want to recommend to everybody that if you don't have one of these, you get it. It's a tracker. There's all different brands. It really doesn't matter which brand you have, but it connects with Find My iPhone. And so I was able to look on my phone. It was still there. I drove back. I went into that room where I had been sitting and listening to the speeches and stuff. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't find it. I knew it was in that room, but it can play a sound. I played it. I'm like, oh my God, it's here. I hear the sound. And even with that, it took me like 10 minutes to find it. It was like, wedged between the edge of a seat, between the edge of the bottom of the seat had folded up and the handrest. Like nobody would have ever found that wallet for the longest time. It was so wedged in there. It just fell out of my pocket. I don't know how. And since there were still people in the lobby mingling, like I left, so I could get back here and teach the class. And with all that background noise, I could barely hear the beeping of that tracker. But I heard it, so I knew it was there. I kept looking. And thank God I found it. I just shared that. That's why I'm late. So I apologize. That's on me. But I did say a prayer as I was going over there. And if you're not familiar with it, I don't even know where I first found this prayer. There's a source for it. You can find it somewhere. But it's a prayer for finding a lost object. And basically what you say is, please God, just as I and this object, that I lost, are revealed before you, so may it be revealed before me. That's the prayer. And it's kind of amazing how many times, I've lost an object, said that prayer, and found it. So I share that with you in case, God forbid, you ever lose something important and you need to get it back. I mean, obviously, it's just a material thing at the end of the day. But if you lose your driver's license and credit cards and other things like that, it's such a hassle these days. I was really glad to be able to get back there and get it. But I apologize that it was because of that we started an hour late. Okay, let's get to it. We have an opportunity to do a double because page 6 is so short. And we have to seize these opportunities when we can. Tomorrow's Erev Shabbos. Erev Rosh Hashanah. So we'll have classes special time, like the Friday schedule, noon. So we'll do noon Pacific. And then we'll be off on Tuesday and Wednesday, Rosh Hashanah. Sometimes I try to do Motzi, a festival, like Wednesday night after the festival. But it's often just very difficult for numerous reasons. So we won't have class Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we'll be back on, I guess, normal time on Thursday. And then, the noon on Friday. Okay, so let's do a double daf. We got a head start already on page 6 to set us up for this. So we're about halfway down page 6. I'm still discussing Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 1 of Tractate Zevachim, the 29th volume of the Talmud. With regard to the law that offerings that were slaughtered not for their sake, somebody was bringing a sin offering, but at the time that the animal was slaughtered, the person slaughtering it thought it was a burnt offering, right? So it wasn't slaughtered for the sake of a sin offering. As an example, it could be other errors, but that kind of error. So with regard to the law, that offerings that are slaughtered not for their own sake are fit to be sacrificed. We finish the process, but they do not satisfy the obligations of their owners. So if the owner was obligated to bring a sin offering because he committed unwitting transgression, and by the way, I only just learned this in Shul yesterday. So how many sins do you think there are for which you bring a sin offering? Right? When do you become obligated to bring a chatas, a sin offering? When you violate a negative prohibition. Now this is for bringing a chatas because of an unwitting transgression. There's other times we bring a sin offering, as we've learned, where not because you committed a sin unwittingly, but the type of offering known as a sin offering is brought, like a woman who is given childbirth, right? She didn't commit a sin, but she brings several different offerings, and one of them is a sin offering. But in terms of becoming obligated to bring a sin offering, because you committed a transgression unwittingly, it's always in the case of a negative prohibition, a thou shalt not, where if you did it intentionally, you'd be liable to kares, right? Excision, death at the hands of the heavenly court, not an earthly court. So there's 365 negative prohibitions. How many of them would result in kares if you committed it intentionally, and a chatas if you committed it unwittingly? 43. 43, that's the number. But, we so often use that he ate forbidden fat accidentally as an example. That's one of the most common examples. But there's actually only 43 different cases where that could apply. Okay, that's only one type of obligation. Also, you might have made a vow to bring a burnt offering, an elevation offering. Now you're obligated to bring it. And as we learned, if when the animal was slaughtered, it was not for its own sake, you still finish the bringing the offering, but it doesn't satisfy your obligation. I think we did see that in the case of some kinds of offerings, they are rendered not fit, so you don't even finish it. That's for sure in the case of the Pesach, right? If you slaughter it not for the sake of a Pesach, you don't finish the procedure. And then there were some arguments where they said a sin offering is in that category also, but I thought there were others where it was you do finish the sin offering. But at any rate, even if it's a situation where you slaughter for the sake of the wrong kind of offering, and it's one of the types where you do complete the journey of the offering, right? You sprinkle its blood, and you shecht it. You put some up on the altar, it gets burned, whatever. You finish the process, but it doesn't satisfy your obligations, right? The law is that it does not satisfy your obligations. It was slaughtered for the sake of the wrong kind of offering. With respect to that law, a dilemma was raised before the sages. After these offerings are sacrificed, Did they atone for the sins for which they came, or did they not atone for them? Or we just said they don't atone. So this is now being raised as a dilemma. So it's interesting. It doesn't satisfy your obligation, but did it atone for you? That's why we're talking about sin offerings. So we're bifurcating the question. You're obligated to bring a sin offering as an atonement. You still have to bring one because it was started for the wrong thing. But does it atone for you? They're asking. So Rav Sheshes, the son of Rav Idi, said it stands to reason that they did not atone. As if it enters your mind that they did atone, for what purpose is the second offering brought since you didn't fulfill your obligation? Why are you bringing it? To make an atonement, right? Why is the owner required to bring another offering if the first one atoned for his sin? But the Gemara challenges this reasoning. Rather, what is the alternative? That they did not atone. If so, for what purpose is the first offering sacrificed? Why do you finish its journey to the altar? Rav Ashi said, this is what was difficult for Rav Shesha, i.e. Rav Sheshes, the son of Rav Idi. Granted, if you say that such an offering did not atone, it is brought even when slaughtered not for its own sake on the strength of its prior consecration for its sake. It was consecrated for that purpose. That's why you're finishing it. And in that case, for what purpose is the second offering brought? It is brought to atone for the sin. But if you say that offerings that were slaughtered not for their sake, atoned for the sin, then for what purpose is the second offering brought? A different dilemma was raised. In other words, that's how you know. That's how you know that it did not atone, because you have to bring another offering because it didn't satisfy your obligation. And if it didn't satisfy your obligation, it must be because it didn't atone. New dilemma. A dilemma was raised before the sages when one brings a burnt offering, which atones for violations of positive mitzvahs, right? Burnt offerings can also be brought as gift offerings, as vow offerings, but in some cases, because you were supposed to do something and you didn't do it, right? As opposed to negative prohibitions where you were supposed to not do something and you did, right? So when you were supposed to do something, like what's a positive commandment? Like putting on tefillin every day for a man, that's a positive commandment. I'm not saying that if you neglect to do it, you have to bring a burnt offering, and we haven't brought any offering since the temple was destroyed almost 2,000 years ago. But there are some situations where, because you didn't do a positive mitzvah, you bring a burnt offering. Okay. So when one brings a burnt offering which atones for violations of positive mitzvahs, does it atone even for a violation of a positive mitzvah that one committed after designating the animal as an offering? Or does it not atone for such a violation? So if bringing a burnt offering, which is entirely consumed on the altar, atones for positive mitzvahs that you neglected to do, well, what if you neglected to do a positive mitzvah, and you neglected to do several positive mitzvahs, and then you consecrate an animal to be a burnt offering, hopefully for more than one, hopefully it covers more than one, I'm not sure. And then you failed to do another positive mitzvah in between consecrating the animal and actually slaughtering it and bringing the offering. Then what? So the Gemara elaborates, do we say that the law in this case is just as with regard to a sin offering, in that just as a sin offering does atone for a sin that one committed before designation of the animal, consecrating it to be that kind of offering, but does not atone for a sin that one committed after such designation. Here too, a burnt offering does atone for violations that one committed before designation, but it does not atone for those committed after designation. Or perhaps a burnt offering is not similar to a sin offering, as with regard to a sin offering, one must bring one sin offering for each and every sin he commits. But here, since a burnt offering atones even for one who has committed several violations of positive mitzvahs, one may claim that it also atones even for the violation of a positive mitzvah that one committed after designating the animal. So which is it? The Gemara suggests, come in here, proof from a baraisa. The verse states, and he shall place his hand on the head of the burnt offering and it shall be accepted for him to atone for him. Leviticus 1:4. And does placing hands atone for one's sins? Placing hands, semicha, putting your hands on the animal that is going to be slaughtered and then offered. Well, but you do it while it's still alive. So does placing hands atone for one's sins? But isn't atonement achieved only by sprinkling the blood? As we've seen, it's the sprinkling of the blood on the altar that is the active part of every offering. All the different elements of slaughtering, collecting the blood, conveying the blood to the altar and sprinkling it, and then whatever else you do with a sin offering, parts of it are burned, parts are eaten by the priest, burnt offering entirely consumed on the altar, peace offering mostly eaten by the person who brought it. But it's the sprinkling of the blood on the altar that does the action, right? That does the action of atonement or making a gift to God. It's the important part, or the most important part. So, but isn't atonement achieved only by the sprinkling of the blood? As it is stated, for it is the blood that makes atonement by reason of life. Leviticus 17:11, and we equate blood with life. So rather, what is the meaning when the verse states, and he shall place, and it shall be accepted for him to atone? This teaches that if one deemed the ritual of placing hands to be a non-essential mitzvah, and consequently failed to perform it, the verse ascribes to him blame as though the offering did not atone for his sins, and nevertheless, the offering does atone for his sins. He should have done that aspect of it, but after the fact, it still works. It atones for him because the blood was sprinkled. So, what? Does the final clause of the Baraisa not mean that the offering atoned for the violation of any positive mitzvah that the owner committed before designation of the animal, but it did not atone for violation of the positive mitzvah placing hands on the head of the offering, as that constitutes a violation of a positive mitzvah, and it happened after designation of the animal. And since it doesn't atone for that mitzvah, that failure to do the mitzvah, so apparently a burnt offering does not atone for violations committed after the animal's designation. But Rav has said in response to this, you say that the positive mitzvah of placing hands is proof? There it is different, since as long as he does not slaughter the offering, he remains obligated to stand and place his hands on its head. He has not yet violated the mitzvah. When does the violation of this positive mitzvah occur? It occurs after the slaughter, at which point fulfillment of the mitzvah is no longer possible. And with regard to a violation committed after the slaughter, we do not raise the dilemma. Clearly, a burnt offering does not atone for such a violation. So the fact that he committed another, or neglected to perform another positive mitzvah after the animal was designated, as long as he still does that, before the animal is slaughtered, then, even though it's after designation, but before slaughter, the slaughter and then the sprinkling will atone for him. So it doesn't matter. So a positive mitzvah that happened after the animal was designated, as long as it happened before the animal was slaughtered, will be covered by that animal to atone for it, according to Rava. Rav Huna bar Yehuda said to Rava, say the Baraisa means that the offering atoned for the transgression of the person, now we're in 6b, but it did not atone for him before heaven, i.e., it is not accepted by God as a perfect offering. Didn't we learn in a Mishnah with regard to the purification process of a mitzvah, one who has tsaras? The verse states, and the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put upon the head of the one that is to be purified to make atonement for him before the Lord. Leviticus 14:18. And this teaches that if the priest placed the oil on the head of the mitzvah, it atoned for him, and he is purified. But if he did not place the oil on his head, it did not atone for him. This is the statement of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, placement of the oil on the head of the mitzvah is a non-essential mitzvah. Therefore, whether the oil was placed on his head or whether it was not placed on his head, it still atones for him. But the verse ascribes the mitzvah blame as though it did not atone for him. Meaning, bringing that offering is part of his purification process, which requires atonement because the mitzvah, the one stricken with tsaras, right? That's a physical expression of a spiritual malady. It's not just a sickness that people get sick. It's not their fault they got sick. But if you get tsaras, it is your fault, right? We don't have tsaras anymore because the spiritual level of our nation has sunk. But when the temple was standing, this was actually a blessing that if you engage in certain behaviors, primarily lashon hara, right, evil speech, gossip, slander, etc., you did it often enough, then you'd get tsaras. You'd have these blemishes on your skin. You'd have to quarantine yourself, wait till it had cleared up, and then you had to bring offerings. Why are you bringing offerings, including a sin offering? Because of the behavior that led to that condition. Okay, so when you go through this purification process, it's both purification and atonement. If one of these steps is left out, the oil on his head, it atones for him, but it doesn't do so in an ideal manner. And one who needs to make an atonement, this is very good teaching right now as we're approaching the days of awe, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. We're going to go, are we just going to be in synagogue and just say the words, read them fast, try to plug in now and then, and do a lot of daydreaming? Will those atone for us? Maybe they will, because at least we showed up. We went to temple. We went there with an intention. Temple. To shul. Some people say go to temple, but let's say we go to shul. And, we showed up. That's important. And we read the words in the Machzor, in the prayer book that we use on high holidays. That's very important. But maybe there's a difference between really doing our best, to plug in and feel and mean it and connect with those atonement prayers, which is not easy because that language is, it's not easy for us. It's so lofty. There's so much of it. And it's so easy to daydream during these long prayer services. But, I challenge us, I encourage us to, plug in as often as we can and really feel what we're trying to say and mean it, right? Mean it. And I would say that, then, we'll not only have that atonement, but God willing, we'll also have that purification and that renewal that's going to, raise us up spiritually, and with God's help, make us better people that are not going to commit at least some of those sins again next year. The Gemara comments, what is the meaning of the phrase, as though it did not atone for him? Like it atones for him, but it is as though it did not atone for him. What does that mean? If we say that it is necessary for the mitzvah to bring another offering of oil, didn't you say that whether the oil was placed on his head or whether it was not placed on his head, it atoned for him? Rather, the meaning of the statement is as follows. It atoned for the person, but did not atone for him before heaven, right? It was not a perfect atonement. So here too, with regard to one who sacrificed an offering without placing hands on its head, the Baraisa apparently means that the offering atoned for the owner's transgression, even if it did not atone for him before heaven, which here we're understanding to mean you could have done a better atonement. Okay, it atoned for you. You did what you needed to do. You fulfill your obligation. You're yotze on that kind of atonement, but you could have done a better job of it. If some step was left out, even if it wasn't your fault, maybe it's because you weren't stringent enough with yourself to do a good job. Like something I'm challenging myself to do this Rosh Hashanah and try to set the model for the whole year is to get to shul on time. If the service starts at 9, arriving at 9 really isn't on time. I got to get there 5 to 9 or 10 to 9. So I can get in there, get comfortable, find my seat, put on my talis. If something goes wrong, something unexpected on the walk over to shul, so then I'm not going to be on time. Or when I get there, somebody has something important they need to ask me or tell me. I'm very involved in kind of like, the leadership of the shul various ways. Some problem comes up, I get involved in that. So then I won't be on time. Right? So to be on time, you got to be early. So I'm challenging myself to be early. Okay. The Gemara rejects this suggestion there too with regard to the purification process of a mitzvah. One can explain that the oil atoned for one matter and did not atone for another. It atoned, In other words, the placement of the oil on the thumb of the Mitzorah and on his big toe, which are parts of his purification, which was performed, affected its atonement, but it did not atone, i.e. there still needs to be an atonement affected by the placement of oil on the head of the Mitzorah. And another log of oil must be brought for the performance of that act, or it's incomplete. So the Gemara returns to the matter of atonement for transgressions committed after the offering's designation, right? In the case of an ola, a burnt offering that atones for the failure to perform a positive mitzvah. So coming here, another proof from a Baraisa, Rabbi Shimon says, with regard to the communal peace offering of 2 lambs that accompanies the 2 loaves on Shavuos, for what sin are they brought? And the Gemara interrupts the citation of the Baraisa. The 2 lambs sacrificed on Shavuos are not brought for a sin. They are peace offerings, brought with the annual public offering of the 2 loaves of new wheat. Rather, the Baraisa should be amended as follows. For what sin are the goats that are sacrificed on Shavuos as a sin offering brought? And Rabbi Shimon answers, they are brought for the defiling of the temple, the holy temple, by entering it while ritually impure, or for defiling its sacrificial foods by partaking of them while ritually impure. Because it might have happened that someone was tameh, or a bunch of people were tameh and didn't know they were tameh and never found out they were tameh. So an atonement for all of them is made by these 2 goats that are brought on Shavuos. Rabbi Shimon continues, once the blood of the first goat is sprinkled on the altar, thereby atoning for this defilement, for what sin is the second one sacrificed? It is sacrificed for any incident involving impurity, tuma, that may have occurred between the sacrifice of that first goat and the sacrifice of this second goat. Based on this, say that the Jewish people should have had to sacrifice their offerings at all times and at every moment. Or perhaps they sinned in the interim, but the verse spared them of this obligation. And the Gemara infers, and here, where an incident involving tuma occurred between the sacrifice of the 2 goats, is a case where the positive mitzvah of distancing ritually impure people from the temple was violated after the designation of the offering, as both goats were designated in advance. And nevertheless, the second goat atones for the violation. So evidently, an offering can atone for transgressions committed after its designation, which is the question we were asking. But the Gemara rejects this inference. If both goats were designated simultaneously, this would indeed be evidence to that effect. But here we are dealing with a case where they were designated sequentially, and an incident involving tuma may have occurred between their respective designations. So the Gemara challenges this assertion, but shall we stand and say about the verse mandating these 2 sin offerings that when it is written specifically with regard to a case where they are designated sequentially? And Rav Papa said the inference can be rejected for a different reason. Do you say that evidence can be adduced from communal offerings? Communal offerings are different, as the court makes a non-verbal stipulation about them, in accordance with that which Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says. As Rav Yehuda says, that Shmuel says, with regard to communal offerings, the slaughtering knife, i.e. the act of slaughter, designates them for what they are. The court stipulates that the second goat be consecrated as it is sacrificed, and it therefore atones for any incidents of tuma that occur beforehand. Individual offerings, by contrast, are designated in advance. They are all designated in advance. They don't become designated at the moment of slaughter, like communal offerings. Sorry, today is the day my allergies acted up. I don't have a tissue here. Let it go. Where was I? Okay, Rav Yosef, the son of Rav Shmuel, said to Rav Papa, but does Rabbi Shimon accept the opinion that the court can make non-verbal stipulation about communal offerings? Doesn't Rav Idi Bar Avin say that Rav Amram says, that Rabbi Yitzchak says, that Rabbi Yochanan says? With regard to animals designated as daily offerings, which are communal offerings, but which in the end were not necessary for use by the public, communal offerings to make an atonement, and let's say the public never sinned that day, so there never was a need for it. Oh, thank you so much, honey. but which were not necessary for use by the public. Now we're on page 7a. According to the statement of Rabbi Shimon, they may not be redeemed as long as they are unblemished, since they retain the status of those communal offerings for which they were going to be brought. But according to the statement of the rabbis, they may be redeemed even when they are unblemished, as the court initially stipulates that if they were not needed, they will not assume the status of an offering. It's not that the people didn't sin. It's that they set aside a certain number of offerings, these animals consecrated for this, and maybe they thought that some of them would develop blemishes, but they never did. So by the end of the year or the end of the period where they would have used those animals, they have animals left over. So they were consecrated to be communal offerings, but they don't need them to bring as the daily offerings. There was a limit on the day. There was just 2 offerings brought every day, whatever the number was. So they didn't need these. So what do they do with them? Right? According to the statement of the rabbis, they may be redeemed even if they are unblemished, because the court initially stipulates that if they are not needed, they will not assume the status of an offering. So that's different than when a person consecrates his animal, to be a sin offering or burnt offering or whatever. Now it's consecrated. You don't make like if I need it. You don't make a stipulation that way. That's only the case of communal offerings, and it's a stipulation of the court. So apparently, Rabbi Shimon does not accept the notion that the court can stipulate that there be a delay in the consecration of communal offerings, and the Baraisa can be adduced as evidence that offerings atone for transgressions committed after their designation as offerings. And furthermore, continued Rav Yosef, the son of Rav Shmuel, one can otherwise infer from the goats sacrificed on Shavuos that an offering can atone for transgressions committed after designation. As Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera, if the goats sacrificed on Shavuos were slaughtered simultaneously, and their blood was collected in 2 cups, and the blood of the first goat was sprinkled, for what sin is the second goat brought? There was no time in the interim for other transgressions to occur. So Rabbi Zera answered, it atones for any incident involving impurity that occurred between the sprinkling of the blood of that first goat and the sprinkling of the blood of this second goat. It's an interesting question. Why do we slaughter 2 goats on Shavuos? Because the Torah says so. And the Torah says that they're being brought as sin offerings, communal sin offerings, to make an atonement for the people. So we bring 2 because the Torah says to bring 2. What they're analyzing is, well, if the first one atones for everything, what's the second one for? The only thing that's left is any sin that occurred between the sprinkling of the blood of the first goat and the sprinkling of the blood of the second goat. It would atone for that. That we're bringing it because the Torah said to bring it. What does it atone for? For that. They bring it, since it must atone for that, this is evidence, right, that an animal that is that if you commit, in the case of an individual, and you commit another transgression after designating an animal to be a burnt offering to atone for the positive mitzvahs you did not perform, that it will still atone for that as long as those new ones that you failed to commit, that you failed to perform, happen before the animal is slaughtered, after designation and before slaughter. Although, what about between slaughter and sprinkling? I guess now we're looking at a different time interval. So let's keep reading. One can infer that Rabbi Yirmiyah raised a dilemma only about whether or not an offering atones for the violation of a positive mitzvah committed after its slaughter and before the sprinkling. But with regard to the violation of a positive mitzvah that one committed after the designation and before the slaughter, he didn't raise the dilemma. So apparently it was obvious to him that the offering does atone for such a violation, one that occurred between designating the animal to be your atonement for, as a burnt offering for positive mitzvahs you failed to perform, after you designated the animal and before you slaughtered it. Yes, it will atone for those mitzvahs. The Gemara rejects this proof. Perhaps Rabbi Yirmiyah's dilemma was also with regard to the violations committed after designation, and he phrased his question to apply to violations committed after slaughter and before sprinkling, because he was saying this: even if you say that an offering atones for violations committed after designation, does it atone for violations committed after slaughter? It may be that neither issue was clear to him. It was stated with regard to a thanks offering that one slaughtered for the sake of somebody else's thanks offering Okay, so we moved on. We didn't settle that question. So now we're moving on to talk about thanks offerings. And now a thanks offering that was the error that was made is not that it was slaughtered for the sake of a different kind of offering, a burnt offering, a sin offering. Rather, somebody had consecrated an animal to bring it as a thanksgiving offering or a thanks offering, a todah. And then, either let's say he gave it to somebody to slaughter in the temple for him. Doesn't have to be a priest, as we've learned. Doesn't have to be a priest to slaughter offerings in the courtyard of the temple, except for certain kinds of offerings, but most not. Okay, but the person who slaughters this animal had in mind that this is the thanks offering of Jim, when in fact it was the thanks offering of Tom. Okay, so he sacrificed it, he slaughtered it for the sake of the wrong person. Okay, what about that? It was stated with regard to a thanks offering that one slaughtered for the sake of somebody else's thanks offering. About this it says, Rabbah says that it is fit. Fit means we continue its journey, but it didn't, satisfy the obligation if somebody vowed to bring a thanks offering. But according to Rabbah, it is fit and it satisfies the owner's obligation. Doesn't matter that the person who slaughtered it had the wrong person in mind. It nevertheless satisfies the obligation of the owner. And Rav Chizda says it is unfit in this regard. Unfit in this regard. Usually fit means do we finish it or not? Qualified is something else. But it sounds like here what they mean is no. Maybe we do continue the journey, but it doesn't satisfy the owner's obligation if he vowed to bring a thanks offering. Rabbah says it is fit because the thanks offering was slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering. Rav Chizda says it is unfit because it must be slaughtered for the sake of his own peace offering, right? Thanks offerings are a kind of peace offering. And so he's saying, no, it has to be slaughtered for the right person. Rabbah said, from where do I say that it is fit? It is as it is taught in the Baraisa. The verse states, and the meat of the sacrifice of his thanks offering, and the meat of the sacrifice of his thanksgiving peace offering. On the day he presents his offering, it shall be eaten. Leviticus 7, verses 15 and 16. Abba Hanin said in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, the verse comes to teach that a thanks offering that one slaughtered for the sake of a peace offering is fit, whereas a peace offering that one slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit. And that's because thanks offerings are a subset of peace offerings. So, right, if it was a thanks offering and you slaughtered for the sake of a peace offering, it still works. But if it was a peace offering and you slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering, you might have now got it wrong, and so it will not fulfill the owner's obligation. And what is the difference between this offering and that offering? A thanks offering is called a peace offering in this verse, but a peace offering is not called a thanks offering. So Rab explains that Baraisa indicates that a peace offering that was slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit, but a thanks offering that was slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering that was slaughtered for the sake of somebody else's thanks offering is fit. And what is it not referring to the thanks offering of another person? Well, the way it was worded is like this. Rab explains, the Baraisa indicates that a peace offering that was slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit, but a thanks offering that was slaughtered for the sake of some other thanks offering is fit, because it's a thanks for a thanks. So what is it not referring to? The thanks offering of another person, teaching that it still satisfies the owner's obligation. And the Gemara responds, no. It is referring to another thanks offering of his own, which he designated to give thanks for another incident of deliverance. Right? This guy was very lucky. He was in a car accident and he survived. He was in a hiking accident and he survived. And both times he vowed to bring a thanksgiving offering for his miraculous deliverance. So if at the time he brings his two thanks offerings, the guy slaughtering it confuses it and says, this is the animal that you're bringing for your delivery from a hiking accident, when in fact it was the animal that he had consecrated to bring for Thanksgiving offering for deliverance from his automobile accident, that will work because their two thanks offerings are the same person. So those are interchangeable. But if the guy slaughtering it got it confused between Jim's thanks offering and thought it was Tom's thanks offering, then it won't work, according to this. The Gemara asks, but if one slaughtered his thanks offering for the sake of somebody else's thanks offering, what is the law? It is unfit, i.e., it does not satisfy the owner's obligation. If so, rather than teaching that a peace offering slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit, let the Baraisa teach that a thanks offering that was slaughtered for the sake of somebody else's thanks offering is unfit. And then it will be obvious, all the more so, that a peace offering slaughtered for the sake of a thanks offering is unfit. And the Gemara answers, it was necessary for the Baraisa to specify a case where a peace offering was slaughtered for the sake of his own thanks offering for another incident. Otherwise, it might enter your mind to say that since a thanks offering is called a peace offering is called a thanks offering as well. And therefore, when one slaughters a peace offering for the sake of a thanks offering, it should be fit. Therefore, the Baraisa teaches us that this is not the case. Rava says, a sin offering that one slaughtered for the sake of another sin offering. Again, Rava says a sin offering that one slaughtered for the sake of another sin offering. Somebody else's or your other sin that you committed? Not specified yet. Just one sin offering slaughtered for the sake of another sin offering. That he is obligated, they are going to say it. A sin offering that one slaughtered for the sake of another sin offering that he was obligated to bring is fit. But if one slaughtered it for the sake of a burnt offering, it is unfit. That's a different kind of offering. So what is the reason for this distinction? And the merciful one states in the Torah, quote, and slaughter it for a sin offering in Leviticus 4:33. And therefore, as long as the sin offering was slaughtered for the sake of a sin offering, even another sin offering that you're obligated to bring, it is fit. But if it was slaughtered for the sake of a burnt offering, even though it's your burnt offering, right? You had to bring both a sin offering and a burnt offering, and they got confused at the time of slaughter, they're unfit because they were slaughtered for the wrong kind of offering. Certainly, it won't fulfill your obligation, but we probably will finish the process. And then it becomes a gift offering. You get credit for a gift offering, but you're still obligated to bring the offerings you vowed to bring, or you're obligated to bring because of an unwitting sin. And Rava says a sin offering that one slaughtered for a person other than its owner, but who nevertheless was obligated to bring a sin offering, is unfit. But if one slaughtered it for one who was obligated to bring a burnt offering, it is fit. And what is the reason for this distinction? The Torah states, and he shall be forgiven in Leviticus 4:26, indicating that it must be specifically he, the owner, who shall be forgiven, and not another person. The other person to whom this is referring, with regard to whom the offering is disqualified, is presumably similar to the owner in that he is obligated to achieve atonement that is similar to the owner's by bringing his own sin offering. So, whereas if the other person is obligated to bring a burnt offering and not a sin offering, that disqualification does not apply. So interestingly, sounds like you're bringing a sin offering. It was slaughtered for the sake of this other guy. The person slaughtering it thinking it's a sin offering, but ascribing it to the wrong person. That person was not obligated to bring a sin offering, which would not work for him since it was not his sin offering. But if he was obligated to bring a burnt offering, then the fact that a sin offering was slaughtered on his behalf will now work for him as a burnt offering simply because we don't have a law disqualifying it in that situation. And Rava says, a sin offering that one slaughtered for a person who is not obligated to bring anything is unfit, as there is no person among the Jewish people who is not obligated to bring an offering for violating a positive mitzvah. Let's read that again. There is no person among the Jewish people who is not obligated to bring an offering, this would be a burnt offering, for violating a positive mitzvah. That means that there's nobody so holy, so righteous, such a tzaddik, such a saint, that he didn't at some point, somewhere, sometime fail to perform a positive mitzvah that he was obligated to do. So that should make us feel a little bit better about ourselves. Because obviously the vast majority of us are obligated to bring so many mitzvahs. There's so many mitzvahs offerings for all the many, many mitzvahs that we failed to do. There's just, who knows, what mitzvah out there that we were obligated to do. We just didn't even realize we were obligated to do it, and we didn't do it. Right? So we all have burnt offerings to bring when the third temple is built, when Mashiach comes, for all the positive mitzvahs that we neglected to do. All of us. There's no Jew exempt from that. And Rava says that a sin offering atones for those obligated to bring a burnt offering for violating a positive mitzvah due to a kal v'chomer inference. If a sin offering atones for those who are liable for transgressions, for which one receives kares, excision from the world to come, if he performs them intentionally, all the more so. Is it not clear that it atones for those liable for failing to perform a positive mitzvah? The Gemara asks, is this to say that the violation of a positive mitzvah is of the same type as the sins atoned for by a sin offering, right? Which are always prohibitions, not positive mitzvahs. But doesn't Rava say that a sin offering that one slaughtered for a person other than its owner, but who was obligated to bring a sin offering, this is unfit, doesn't work for him. But if it was slaughtered for a person who is obligated to bring a burnt offering, it is fit, as he is not obligated to provide a similar atonement. So given that burnt offerings atone for violations of positive mitzvahs, apparently such atonement is of a different type than atonement for the transgression of prohibitions. Now we're on 7b. And the Gemara answers, a sin offering does not atone for violating a positive mitzvah by its essence, since prohibitions and positive mitzvahs are not the same type. But a sin offering can atone for failure to perform positive mitzvahs incidentally. It's not the way you're supposed to do it, but if it happened, like you got lucky, somebody else is bringing a sin offering, you needed to bring a burnt offering, maybe your offering got disqualified for some reason, it was blemished, but then they made a mistake and somebody else's sin offering was slaughtered as a sin offering for you. So now that guy needs to bring another sin offering because his obligation is not fulfilled. But somehow that sin offering that was accidentally slaughtered on your behalf because they made a mistake. You're not obligated to bring a sin offering, but now you have achieved an atonement for the positive mitzvahs that you failed to do. It's just luck, right? It's just luck. It's like a loophole. It just happens to work out that way. And Rava says, as for a burnt offering that one slaughtered not for its own sake, it is still prohibited to sprinkle its blood, not for its sake. Okay, you made a mistake at the time of slaughter. But now, when you complete the burnt offering, like they realize they made a mistake, so now you can't bring it on behalf of someone else. So it sounds like a sin offering that was slaughtered on behalf of this guy who doesn't need to bring a sin offering, doesn't need to bring a burnt offering. Now they could treat it as a burnt offering the rest of the way, and it will work for him. But a burnt offering that was slaughtered not for its own sake, you can't continue its journey as anything other than a burnt offering for its original owner. It won't fulfill his obligation, but that's the way it needs to be finished. Why is this? If you wish, cite a verse, and if you wish, propose a logical argument, and the Gemara explains, if you wish, cite a verse, that which has gone out of your lips you shall observe and do, according to that which you have vowed freely to the Lord your God, even that which you have promised with your mouth. And the derivation from this verse was explained on page 2a. Because you said you're going to do it, you have to finish, right? It doesn't fulfill your obligation, but we complete the journey to the altar because you said you were going to bring that offering. You vowed. That's why we finish it. Or if you wish, propose a logical argument, just because one deviated from protocol in its slaughter, shall he continue to deviate from protocol in the rest of the sacrificial process? This is as it was stated at the beginning of the chapter on page 2a. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. And Rava says with regard to a burnt offering that is brought by its owner's heirs after his death, if one slaughtered it with a deviation from the type of offering, right? You slaughtered a sin offering as a burnt offering. It is unfit, i.e. it does not satisfy the owner's obligation, and the heirs must therefore bring another offering. But if it was slaughtered with a deviation with regard to its owner, i.e. for the sake of another person, it is fit, as the offering has no legal owner after the owner's death. And Rav Pinchas, the son of Rav Ami, says that an offering has an owner after its owner's death, i.e. the heir. So Rav Ashi said to Rav Pinchas, the son of Rav Ami, is the master saying that an offering actually has an owner after its death, after the owner's death? And that if it was slaughtered for the sake of the wrong owner, the heir must bring another burnt offering, contrary to the opinion of Rava? Or perhaps the master is merely saying that if the heir has several violations of positive mitzvahs, the offering atones for them, but still, if it was slaughtered for the sake of the wrong owner, the heir is not required to bring another offering. And Rav Pinchas said to him, I am saying that the heir is actually the owner, and if the offering was slaughtered for someone else, he must bring another offering. Was he bringing, the father died, right? The father designated an animal to be a burnt offering, and then he died. The son inherited that consecrated animal. Is he now bringing it to atone for his own sins, right? Failing to perform positive mitzvahs? Or is he sort of finishing the journey on behalf of his father? The answer to that is based on what we're talking about here. Is he the owner, or is he just the father's agent to finish the process of bringing an animal that the father consecrated? Right? And Rav Pinchas said to him, I am saying that the heir is actually the owner. And therefore, now he's bringing it for his own transgressions. And if then the animal gets slaughtered for the sake of the wrong person or the wrong offering, now he has to bring a different one. And Rava says a burnt offering is a gift to God. Its essential purpose is not atonement. But aren't we saying that it's atonement for failure to do positive mitzvahs? Yeah, but that's not really why we bring burnt offerings. An olah is a free will offering. You're just saying you're like so thankful to God, you love God so much, you want to show how much you love God, so you vow to bring a burnt offering, an olah, that's entirely consumed by the altar, right? It's actually an offering of praise, not atonement. And Rava supports his assertion. What are the circumstances under which a burnt offering atones for violating a positive mitzvah? If one brings a burnt offering without repentance for his transgression, he may not sacrifice it at all, as the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. Now, as we go into our atonement during these days of awe, right, we can't be thinking, I'm just, first of all, you can't say, I'm going to just do this and atone for it later, right? And then the atonement's going to take care of it. Or you can't say, as you're atoning, well, this will cover me for last year, but I'm going to go right back and do this again. Now, we may slip and fall, but at the time that you're making this atonement, right? And why am I talking about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur? Because now we atone through prayer. We don't bring offerings anymore. So our prayers act as our atonement, right? But you have to actually atone in your heart, not just say the prayers. It may be that we repeat the same actions next year, but we've got to be trying not to, right? We have to genuinely feel remorse and confess and seek to make a sincere atonement. Or it's not an atonement. And it's even worse than that. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. Proverbs 21:27. And if there is repentance, isn't it taught in a Baraisa that if one violates a positive mitzvah and he repents, God forgives him before he even moves from his place? It could happen. You screw up. You got so busy. You missed a prayer. You didn't make it up at the next prayer service. You got so busy. You didn't put on tefillin that day. But when you realize you did it, please, God, forgive me. I really wanted to do that. I'm so sorry. I was careless, and that's why. I didn't put you first, right? I didn't take loving God seriously, and that's why I let this thing slip from me. But you feel genuine contrition about that, God forgives you like the second you express that genuine contrition, according to this. God forgives him even before he moves from his place. Well, if that's true, why is he required to bring an offering? Rather conclude from it that a burnt offering is a gift that one brings in order to appease God even after he is forgiven. Right? We bring these burnt offerings because we're so grateful to a God who loves us, who issues commandments because he loves us, and he accepts our apology and our contrition and our atonement. When it's real, we have such a wonderful relationship with God, and we want to just, express gratitude and joy in that relationship. That's why you bring the burnt offering, not to actually achieve atonement, which you achieved as soon as you apologize. This is, again, for neglect of positive mitzvahs. This last statement of Rav is also taught in Baraisa. Rabbi Shimon said, for what purpose is a sin offering brought? The Gemara interrupts, for what purpose is it brought? Is it not brought to atone for a transgression of a prohibition? Rather, Rabbi Shimon meant this. For what reason is it brought before a burnt offering in all circumstances when both are brought? And Rabbi Shimon answered, it is comparable to an advocate who enters before the king to convince him to pardon the defendant. Once the advocate has appeased the king, then the gift is brought in after him. Right? You make the sin offering first, because you got to bring the contrition, especially for violating prohibitions, which is a bigger deal than neglect of positive mitzvahs. And then you make the gift of the burnt offering. That's where we'll stop and take a few questions. Sharon, with all due respect and with complete desire that the temple is rebuilt, I think Sharon is saying, I hold by Maimonides that the sacrificial system was a bridge to get us to the place that prayer is the more perfect vehicle for atonement. Try as I might to connect with these texts, I struggled with what appears to be such an excess of blood spilling of innocent creatures, and before being asked, yes, I am a vegetarian. Let's put it this way. I'm happy no matter which way it goes, right? I just want the third temple to be rebuilt. And if the third temple is being rebuilt, it's going to be rebuilt by Mashiach. And Mashiach will let us know, are we still going to bring the animal sacrifices? Or was that, as Sharon is alluding to, I think Maimonides said at one point, that was necessary because, bringing animal sacrifices in the ancient world, like it was worship. That's just how people worship. So God was teaching the Jews to worship God, the one God, but teaching them to worship in the way they understood, which was bringing animal sacrifices. And then eventually, the world moved past that. And so according to this view, even when the third temple is built, we won't bring animal sacrifices. But obviously that's not a universal view. There are others that feel like, well, there's all these commandments in the Torah that we just can't fulfill until the temple is rebuilt, and then we will do it. But, we won't have to make this up. We won't have to guess. There'll be no guesswork on this. We'll be told in no uncertain terms which way it's going to go. Bill, in summaries, C's get degrees is not, generally speaking, a position that Torah wants us to take with regard to atonement. Very good, right? The minimum, required allotment is not good enough. We're trying to go for the A+ when it comes to atonement, which is not easy. It's not easy. When we're sitting this whole week, right, we're reading slichas, which are atonement prayers, penitential prayers. We read them every morning. And, it's like a lot of them. And tomorrow, Erev Rosh Hashanah, is a very long slichas service. And we'll be reading a lot of prayers about atonement. And, most congregations, they're trying to get through it in an hour so that they can get to the morning prayers. And actually, to get through slichas in an hour means you rushed. So if you're rushing penitential prayers, how penitential are they? That's like the real world. So that's why I say, maybe that's the real world. Maybe it's just not realistic that we're going to spend 3 hours saying those slichas. But at least from time to time, we can stop, read, a few phrases or a few verses and take it in and be affected by it. Elvis, it seems to me that while a person can violate mitzvahs in an instant, even unwittingly, The process of atonement in ancient times was very precise and deliberate and even complex. Perhaps this functioned as an incentive to be mindful of your conduct and to consciously avoid transgressions to the greatest extent possible. This lesson would still serve us well today. Amen. Yes, and not only that, why is it, right, that we bring a chatas, a sin offering, only for unwitting sins, not for intentional sins? Intentional sins, we say there's other means of atonement, but not being obligated to bring an animal to, walk with it up to Jerusalem, bring it in the Holy Temple. Why does it seem like it's tougher to atone for an unwitting sin than an intentional sin? Because the intentional sin, okay, you got weak, there was a temptation, you gave into it, you know you did wrong. The unwitting sin means you were managing your life somewhat sloppily and actually could be evidence of a greater problem. And that's why it's even tougher to bring the asham tului, which is the guilt offering of uncertainty, whether you're not even sure if you committed the unwitting sin or not. Because that might actually be evidence of even sloppier living. Mindfulness, study, dedication, like loving God and asking God, please help me be a better Jew. All of it is part of a process, and we'll never get there, right? I mean, realistically, we'll never get to the top of that mountain. But God very much appreciates that we're always trying to become better at this, closer to Torah, closer to God, closer to righteousness than we were before. That takes work. Joseph, what if two people are giving an offering for the same circumstances and they get mixed up? Sounds like unfit. We finished the journey of the offerings, but neither one satisfied his obligation. I think we actually had that case. And finally, Paul, don't Jewish people have a day that they atone for their sins or offenses? Yes, Yom Kippur, right? But Yom Kippur is not a single day in the sense that we have a season of atonement, right? It begins in the last month of the Hebrew year, which we're now finishing up, Elul. We've been in it for almost 30 days, when we're making an accounting of our deeds, figuring out what did we do wrong, what does need atoning, right? Then we get to Rosh Hashanah when we crown God as our king, right? It's especially about the sovereignty of God in our lives, but also acknowledging him as the judge who will preside over this trial in which we need to atone. Then we have the 10 days connecting Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we're engaged in all this prayer and atonement leading up to Yom Kippur. And then, yes, Yom Kippur is kind of the culmination of that. Although, there's especially Hasidic teachings will say that we have up until, then we still have during Sukkot, to try to sort of slip a note under the door. Like, officially the gates close at the end of Yom Kippur, and then if we didn't make an atonement by then, it's too late. But our sages say, and certainly Hasidic Rebbes say, that, even Sukkot, we still have an opportunity, at least until, I think, Hoshana Rabbah, near the end of Sukkot, to slip a note under the gates, as it were, asking God to forgive us, and we'll get forgiven. God is very merciful. But yes, the day of Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. It just fits in with this whole system of atonement. But when the temple was standing, exactly, that's when the high priest brought these two goats, one that was sent into the wilderness, the other was slaughtered in the temple. And that goat was meant to atone for all the stuff that we did and somehow didn't make an atonement for. It doesn't get us off the hook of making an atonement. We need to make an atonement. But we all know that there's things that we did that we never even realized we needed to atone for. And the goats of Yom Kippur will cover that. That's what I've got for us today. With God's help, see you tomorrow, Monday, Erev Shabbos at noon Pacific. All the best.